right now. They're issuing out several warnings for people ahead of this storm. Number one, catastrophic storm surge. That is what meteorologists and experts are most concerned about. We could see inundation of 12 to 16 feet above ground level, along with destructive waves. That's expected somewhere along the southwest Florida coastline from Inglewood to Bonita Beach. This includes Charlotte Harbor. Residents in these areas should urgently follow all evacuation orders in effect if it is still safe, I will add. Catastrophic wind damage is expected along the southwestern coast of Florida beginning in the next few hours, where the core of Ian will make landfall. Preparations to protect life and property should be urgently rushed to completion. Also, heavy rainfall will spread across the Florida peninsula through Thursday and will reach portions of the southeastern United States later this week, as well as well into this weekend. So widespread, life-threatening, catastrophic flooding is expected across portions of central Florida, with considerable flooding in southern Florida, northern Florida, southeastern Georgia, and coastal South Carolina. We'll continue to track this storm well into this weekend. We briefly showed you all a live update from Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, who is just like every other emergency management personnel or official, just urging everyone to stay safe at this time, guys. This is not the time to be on the road. It's not the time to be at the beach trying to get a look at the conditions, because things can quickly deteriorate. We're taking a look back at this video from about 24 hours ago in South Florida. As you can see here, these beach goers really excited about the waves and the wind, but this is exactly what officials are warning us not to do. We should be at home, preparing, staying safe, making sure that we all are prepared for the worst. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. We are slowly approaching the 9 a.m. mark here at Live Now from Fox. We will take a 2-minute commercial break, and when we return, we will bring you all up to speed on exactly where Hurricane Ian is heading, how fast the storm is traveling, and we'll update you all on the wind strength with our news partners at Fox Weather right after this break. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. The time is now 8:59, swiftly approaching the 9 a.m. hour as we continue to bring you all nonstop coverage of Hurricane Ian, especially as it is nearing Category 5 strength. We are taking a look at some video that we received to our desk yesterday. Beachgoers in South Florida taking a look at the conditions, but I'm sure that conditions have since rapidly deteriorated. That is why we are closely monitoring every update. Again, let's go ahead and check in with our news partners at Fox 35 Orlando. They're going to bring us a more localized approach.
Palm Bay out toward the Satellite Beach area. That's some super heavy rain. A lot of this cranking steadily down to the north and west. We'll cross over 192, approaching the radar site. And as we give you a look at the rain rate, I mean, just tremendous stuff. We have to certainly factor in where this rain is spawning from. This is a full-on major hurricane, a tropical system approaching the southwest side of the state. So we talk about the rain impacts, and they are tremendous. The flood potential is high. The rainfall rate per hour being dispatched from the bottom of some of these storm clouds and rain bands as much as 6 or 7 inches per hour, and even on the plus side of that, if you catch my drift here. So it's super, super heavy out near Lake Kissimmee, Florida Turnpike. You can see all this big mass here from Prairie Lakes Road making a move toward Lake Kissimmee, and the bigger view now showing a little bit closer to Orlando and Oak Ridge. Just very consistent, very focused rain. It isn't super heavy. It isn't super light. It's kind of right in between. So that's what we've got on tap before we start to see a lot of this stuff here. Very, very heavy, moving north and west. So what is down south, we've been telling you in our messaging all morning, you can fully expect that for areas north of the heavy rain zones at this time. There is a look there at Ian. I mentioned earlier that we don't usually see lightning strikes in tropical systems, but when they're this strong, anything is on the table, as we say. Upwards of 92 now at peak. So that outer rim here along that eye wall really featuring that very defined eye. This drawing closer to Cape Coral area now, about roughly 38.4 miles to the southwest there. And a look up toward Venice and Port Charlotte, very heavy rain. We've had a couple tornado warned areas there, mainly through the overnight hours. That is now kind of morphed into a threat that has moved northbound. And we talk about the current watches and warnings. A hurricane warning continues for all the red shaded counties here, and the communities highlighted tropical storm watch, or warning rather, in the orange here, tropical storm watch up near Gainesville and into Gilchrist County as well. And we also have this tornado watch going strong until 5 o'clock today. And Allison, I fully expect to see these rain bands producing the very heavy rain and the risk of tornadoes on tap as we go through the remaining hours here of this day ahead. Even into tomorrow morning, the potential is certainly there. And we talk about the rain as well. Boy, when you got this tropical stuff going on, when it rains, it absolutely pours.
That's exactly right. And it's not moving very quickly, so a lot of rain is expected, starting down near Bradenton, moving into Lakeland, Claremont, DeLand, Oviedo, Daytona Beach. Totals through early Friday morning. Take a look at this. Up to 29 inches possible in DeLand, 25 in Pearson, 24 in Daytona Beach, and about 22 possible in Orlando. So with that being said, we are looking at the risk for flash flooding. That is going to be a real possibility. We want to make sure that everybody is going to be staying safe and aware that a lot of rain is on the way. But I do want to take you into our Storm Prediction Center, what we are seeing, the heightened risk. So there is a very likely 3 out of 5 risk for not only the heavy rain damaging wind gusts, but also tornadoes. And then if we take a look at what we could be seeing tomorrow, it's going to be a likely risk moving up into Orange, Seminole, Volusia, as well as Flagler County. So Jamie, everybody at home can depend on us. If there are tornado warnings, we will be watching them and we will be tracking them live for you right here from the Fox 35 Storm Center.
Okay, so I noticed some of these rain bands freshening up in Brevard County, Osceola County, and some of this trying to get into the metro. So what we're going to do is we're going to send it back to the anchor team, and Allison and I are going to survey the radar. I want to see about rotation. I've seen a few areas of concern, not immediate concern, but maybe longer term as we go through about the next hour. So we'll revamp here in the Storm Center. I want to send it back to you now on the desk. Amy, we'll give it over to you now.
All right. Sure. Thanks, you guys. Our live team coverage continues this morning. Fox 35's David Martin has been in Sarasota all morning, and I know you were there yesterday too, David, talking to some of the people as they were preparing for the storm, and it felt like people were taking it seriously.
Yeah, many of them did evacuate. I was surprised at the number of people, Amy, who did not board up. They may come back to their houses slightly wet after today's big storm. Behind me, look at this, the famous turn here for the Sarasota Jungle Gardens attraction has been toppled here along the Tamiami Trail in Sarasota. The Jungle Gardens has been around since 1939, one of Florida's oldest attractions. This is the intersection of Myrtle and Tamiami. Found it fascinating that the Dollar General across the street is open. We've seen a lot of people coming out of that looking for some batteries and last minute supplies, of course. The Walgreens diagonal, we've seen the lights flicker on and off in the past 30 minutes. So conditions are worsening here in Sarasota. Amy, we're going to send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, David.
Well, Ian's cone of uncertainty has now moved south of Tampa Bay, but that does not mean that part of the West Coast is out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, the storm is huge, right?
Huge.
So Fox 35's Dave Puglisi is in Tampa. He has got the Fox 35 Storm Team Thunder Truck with him this morning. It doesn't look too bad in Tampa right now, David, but we really thought that that area was going to be hard hit. Now, maybe not as bad.
Yeah, I mean, people here are really breathing a sigh of relief and taking advantage of the time they have right now where the rain has really eased up. It was definitely harder earlier this morning. If you've been watching Fox 35 since we came on air at 4 o'clock, you would have seen that there has been some stronger winds and rains that have come through. But right now, things have eased up. Although this rain is starting to kick up here. You can see off in the distance here, the rain is coming from our back as this storm continues to swirl over us. The clouds are harder to see now. We just showed you about them 10 minutes ago as the rain has picked up quite a bit. Another thing to note, the water levels have dropped a little bit here in the bay. Now, it's important to note that the low tide will be about 10:50 today, so part of that could be low tide. Some of it could be from the storm. It's hard to tell given that low tide is so close to now. But now you can see the winds are starting to pick up a little bit. The rain is starting to come back. We did talk to people yesterday who were boarding up in preparation for fear that this could be worse.
I'm a little bit excited, but I'm starting to get a little worried because you have to prepare, you have to take it seriously because.
And people have been taking it seriously here. People listen to the warnings, and evacuations for zones A and B happened yesterday. Most people have left. We haven't seen many people around, but those who are riding it out are hoping for the best, although the rain is starting to pick up here. So again, no one's out of the woods. We are close enough to Hurricane Ian that they will be feeling these winds and rains, so we're going to have more of that throughout the morning. But that's the latest in Tampa Bay. Dave Puglisi, Fox 35 News.
All right, definitely the rain hitting hard on that lens. Dave, thanks. Seminole County has issued an evacuation order as of this morning. This is for flood-prone mobile homes and anyone who has special needs. Here are some of the shelters that have opened so far. Lake Mary High School and Lyman High School are open. Lake Mary is in Lake Mary, obviously, and Lyman is in Longwood. Midway Elementary is open right now in Sanford. That's right next to Millennium Middle School. Winter Springs High School is also open as a shelter, and Bentley, which is in Sanford, and Lair Elementary Schools, they are also offering shelters for people who might have special needs, especially if you need any kind of oxygen, that needs to stay running. It's really important that you get to one of those shelters.
And what tends to happen is people tend to want to wait and say, oh, maybe I'll go later. But now is the time to go if you do need special assistance.
Yeah, Jamie's saying he wants everybody to be off the roads by 10 this morning.
For sure.
We do have a lot more coming up on Good Day Orlando. Fox 35 is your headquarters as we track Hurricane Ian.
And we're right. That was the latest from our news partners in Orlando. Fox 35 Orlando, keeping us up to speed on Hurricane Ian. We are taking a live now look from Tampa, Florida. As you can see here, conditions are beginning to deteriorate. We are taking a look at the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, which of course, as you can imagine, is closed because of Hurricane Ian. Now, with winds caused by Hurricane Ian ranging now up to 155 miles per hour, the Florida Highway Patrol did close this bridge, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, in both directions earlier this morning. Now, the 4-lane cable-stayed concrete bridge with northbound and southbound lanes is a part of the I-275 in the United States Highway 19. It connects Pinellas and Manatee counties, and this bridge, of course, closes whenever there is a maximum sustained wind of 40 miles per hour or higher. This bridge will remain closed until Ian passes. Of course, Ian now tracking 155 miles per hour. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has declared a state of emergency over the whole state of Florida. He did this over the weekend. President Joe Biden has already approved Florida's emergency declaration. This took place on Sunday. And moments ago in a news conference, the governor saying that regardless of Ian's exact track or intensity, there is still significant risk to life. The life-threatening storm surge is what many people are concerned about. Hurricane-forced winds, as well as heavy rainfall along the western portion of Florida and the Florida Panhandle by the middle of the work week. A serious cause for concern. That approval that we saw from President Biden is going to authorize the Department of Homeland Security as well as the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, to coordinate disaster relief efforts for the entire state. We've learned since 8 o'clock this morning that 5,000 National Guard members have been activated across the state, and they are on standby in case people need to be rescued from their homes. The governor also telling people that now is not really the time to evacuate anymore. We may have missed that window because, as you can see here, conditions are beginning to deteriorate, and honestly, it's just not safe to be on the road at this time. Now's the time to hunker down and make indoor preparations. But again, DeSantis saying that crews are well prepared, well positioned, and equipped across the state to respond to Hurricane Ian recovery, rescue, and of course cleanup efforts. We'll see more of that after the storm moves out of this region. But the governor speaking to residents in the state of Florida, here's more on what he had to say.
Life-threatening storm surge, flooding, tropical storm force winds will be felt throughout the entire state, and even isolated tornadoes. I urge Floridians who have made the decision to shelter in place, to stay indoors, and stay off the roads. You do not want to be outdoors or on the roads as a storm of this size is making landfall in your area. It is extremely dangerous. Power outages will occur. If you get a weather alert for a tornado, and as the governor has already mentioned, if you're in the Southwest Florida area, you should make the same preparations as if it is a tornado going over your house. Get to an interior room, free of windows. Have stuff to be able to protect your head and body from the debris, such as a blanket, sleeping bag, mattress, or even potentially helmets. If there are flash flood warnings in your area, remember, it is never safe to walk or drive through flooded areas. We continue to coordinate with all of our electrical partners. As the governor's mentioned, there are over 30,000 linemen staged throughout the city, from north central Florida all the way down to Miami. As areas in South Florida and the Keys begin to experience power outages, remember to contact your service provider, not 911, for power restoration. You can also keep your refrigerators shut. If residents have any questions about resources for Hurricane Ian, I urge them to reach out to their local emergency management or public safety office. This storm is here. It is imminent. I can tell you it is a Cat 4 hurricane, nearly a Cat 5. I know all of the emergency management directors in Southwest Florida very well. Combined, they have over 200 years of experience. They're preparing and they're expecting a Cat 5. So,
and that was the latest from Emergency Management Chief Ed McCrane, providing an update alongside Florida Governor Ron DeSantis about an hour or so ago today, continuing to warn residents about deteriorating conditions. As we take this live now look from Tampa, Florida, you can see that is exactly what is taking place now. The Florida Department of Emergency Management has also loaded 360 trailers with more than 2 million meals and more than 1 million gallons of water in preparation for distribution in areas that are affected by Hurricane Ian. Now, because of Hurricane Ian, again, 5,000 members of the Florida National Guard have been activated and have been pre-positioned at locations across the state. In addition, 2,000 National Guard members from Tennessee, Georgia, and North Carolina have also been activated to assist. We've also seen this with linemen, power companies coming from neighboring states, prepping and staging in areas across the state, because we will see power outages for days, if not weeks. So we have a lot of resources on standby. Nearly 3,000 ambulances Paratransit buses and other support vehicles have also been deployed to areas where Hurricane Ian could have a major impact. DeSantis said just a few moments ago, I know we've got a lot of people who just moved to the state of Florida. Just make sure that you are prepared. For a lot of people, this is their very first hurricane, but that doesn't mean that that's an excuse to be ill prepared. Make sure that you all are heeding all warnings. We also got this update from emergency management officials. Chief Ed McCrane, he was providing updates on Hurricane Ian just moments ago. Here's more of what he had to say about deteriorating conditions.
Waking up this morning, you're seeing the conditions outside deteriorate. The weather and the winds are picking up. It's only a few more hours before we won't be able to roll any emergency vehicles. We're making that determination now. The winds, as I'm doing this right now, are probably 39, but they will continue to increase. If you can still get to an evacuation center, evacuation shelter, or a friend or family member's house safely, then do that. If you get to a point where you have not done that and you are at home, you need to shelter in place. Find that safe room inside your house. Make sure everybody in the family knows where that is. And if things start going bad, you need to get everybody to that room and stay low. So this is a serious storm. We're going to feel this probably for the next 24 hours as it passes to our south. It looks like it's going to be entering Charlotte Harbor and coming right through the county. So do the best you can with the situation right now. But again, if you can safely still get to an evacuation center, please do that.
Thanks, Ed, and thank you for everything you do for our community.
All right, we're taking a live now look from Tampa, Florida, as we continue to track Hurricane Ian. As you can see here, conditions are beginning to deteriorate. On the left side of your screen, we're taking a live look at our XRAD weather radar. If you're just now joining us, Hurricane Ian is expected to make landfall along Florida's west coast in a matter of hours. Ian is now a very powerful Category 4 storm, packing winds of 155 miles per hour, making it just shy of Category 5 strength. The National Hurricane Center says that Ian is expected to cause life-threatening storm surge, catastrophic winds, and flooding in the Florida Peninsula. Let's go ahead and check in with our local partners at Fox 13.
Where you get all those little white dots that are blinking, that's lightning. And when you get lightning inside a storm like this, that's a sign that it's intensifying, or at least trying to continue to intensify. So this may be intensifying, or at least holding this strong Category 4 status, or 5 perhaps, on its way to this landfall later in the afternoon. Here's kind of a better look, and I can kind of zoom in and show you where this lightning is. It's amazing. Boy, right around the bottom part of this eye wall is where you're going to have those 155-mile-per-hour winds. You're going up the coast. We were just watching our reporters reporting live, and you can see, of course, all the rain bands coming in from Sarasota. By the way, inside some of these heavier red rain bands, that's where you're going to have those tropical storm force winds gusts. That's where you're going to get your gustiest wind inside the rain bands. I mean, you're solidly in it in Venice, down to Port Charlotte, and as you go up the coast, we're still getting, here's a rain band that moved through Dade City into the Tampa area, and more as we get closer and closer to the storm making landfall this afternoon. The rain is obviously going to increase for everybody. The satellite presentation, it's impressive and odd at the same time, because on one hand, you obviously see where the center of the storm is, and that purple wrapping around it, those deep purple color, that is those highest cloud tops where those big towers are. But look at the left side of your screen, the west side of it. That's wind shear. That west to southwest wind shear is trying to impact the storm, and it's compressing the storm a little bit. So it's walled itself off against the dry air for now. We were hoping that if it was out over water longer, that the dry air would get in and try to weaken the storm a little bit, but I think it's going to run out of time before that drier air does get in. And yeah, we're looking at a minimum Category 4 landfall coming up later this afternoon. So for more on that and the impacts locally, what we can expect, let's turn it over to Jim Weber.
Yeah, Dave, and you know, one of the graphics that you showed that I think is really telling is when you look at that radar loop and you see all the lightning around the eye. There's typically not a whole lot of lightning in a tropical system, so when you see that lightning, it is indicative, it's showing you that this is a very vigorous storm. That eye is very active, and it is really continuing to go through that intensification process. So really the worry is, and that's really the worst case scenario, to be talking about an intensifying storm as it is making landfall, and it looks like that is exactly what we are talking about. Top winds right now are at 155 miles an hour. This is a top end Category 4. At this point, really doesn't matter whether this is a Category 4 or a Category 5. You're talking a couple miles an hour difference, so the damage is the same at this point, but it's currently moving to the north-northeast at 10 miles an hour. So really, that landfall is not too long from now. We're talking a matter of hours until it makes landfall later on this afternoon. Those winds right around 155 miles an hour. But then what's really amazing and telling about this is, you notice by the time we go from 2 o'clock today until 2 o'clock tomorrow morning over into Polk County, we are still talking about a hurricane of 90 miles an hour. So often people think if you live in the middle of the state, this is a coastal event. And once again, we've seen this over the years. This affects the entire state. So right through Polk County, heading over towards Orlando, over onto the other side of the state, we're talking 60 to 90 mile an hour winds as it works its way across. And then on top of that, all the rainfall with this, because it's slowing down. We have the wind shear, and it's actually interacting with a front just to the north. So that's why we're talking so much about that heavy rainfall potential with it, and then that storm surge on that right-hand side. Now, the threat has gone down tremendously across Tampa Bay. What we'll actually see is more of the water pushing out of the bay. There will still be some flooding areas, but really the main threat is as you head down towards Port Charlotte, down towards Fort Myers, Bonita Springs. That's where you're going to see that storm surge 12 to 18 feet. So we're talking about a huge life-threatening storm surge in this area. It's all on that right-hand side as the wind is rotating around the center of the storm. That is where you see the strongest and the highest wind surge or storm surge. Now, tornado watch, that goes until 5 o'clock this afternoon. Manatee, Sarasota, Polk County, and to the south. As we head through the rest of the afternoon, quite likely seeing this extended. Some other counties will be added into this, but the highest threat of the tornadoes is on that right-hand side of the storm as well. It doesn't mean we cannot see them on the other side, but that's where you tend to see more of the tornadoes. And then the rainfall. We're talking 12 to 18 inches of rain, with some areas up to about 24 inches of rain. So this is a graphic that you do not see very often. The flash flood risk to see not only high, but so much of the area under that high risk of flash flooding. This is the type of rainfall that we're gonna look back at, and this is going to be something that is remembered for years and years, the kind of rain that we are talking about with this. So as we go through the rest of the day, these are some of the wind forecast gust. So just kind of give you an idea when you could expect to see some of those winds working their way through. As we go through the afternoon, you see those winds starting to gust over hurricane force. And then it continues to push on towards the middle of the state. And then by tomorrow, we start to see the winds turning more towards the northwesterly direction and starting to settle down. But then by Friday and Saturday, things looking much better. Rainfall amounts, there you see it, really going way up the scale. As far as the impacts that we're expecting, 70+ mile an hour wind gusts, storm surge, mainly to our south, 12 to 18 inches with some areas up to 24 inches of rain possible. Across our northern counties, you will fare better, but still heavy rain up in that direction. And then the winds gusting to tropical storm force. Inland counties, you're going to see those hurricane force winds, or at least gusts to that, as we go through the day into tomorrow, and the possibility of tornadoes as well. And there you see those rainfall amounts, that swath basically cutting right across the state and up towards Daytona. Dave?
I get Jim. Thank you. Stay with us. Straight ahead, President Biden has made some calls to local mayors in Ian's path. We've got more on the federal response to the potential disaster ahead. And Charlie Belcher's in Clearwater at the Clearwater Marine Aquarium this morning, seeing how they're doing there, seeing how they're prepping for the storm. So relaxing. We're going to check in with him when we come back.
Fox 13.
A huge thank you to our local news partners, Fox 13 Tampa, as well as Fox 35 Orlando, helping us bring you all wall-to-wall coverage as we continue to track Hurricane Ian, which is now nearing Category 5 strength. We are continuing to take a look at our XRAD weather radar. It's showing us the latest information when it comes to Ian's projected path. It's really barreling towards Central Florida at this time. The entire state of Florida is again under a state of emergency, and we are seeing both mandatory and voluntary evacuation. So that is why this is such an important situation. Let's go ahead and check in with Fox Weather. They're bringing us an update on power outages. We're already beginning to see some down power lines throughout the western coastline and in southern Florida.
We're seeing a lot of red around that eye wall, and that is definitely showing the strengthening of this system. And unfortunately, this is still a hurricane that is actively strengthening, and we're very concerned about this eye wall. That's where the strongest winds are, and in fact the diameter of it is about 35 miles wide. This is a large eye. It's a very large storm. We've had tropical storm conditions this morning across the Florida Keys, and that continues. I mean, we have wind gusts around 46 miles per hour, sustained winds at 37. We have had some storm surge issues in Key West, and that is going to continue with the next high tide cycle. So please make sure that you're staying inside your house somewhere safe. Now, the storm surge issue is going to be a larger concern well to the north of Key West. That southwest shore of Florida is going to be a highlight area where, unfortunately, we are going to have life-threatening storm surge that is going to be moving in this afternoon. Right now, our winds are still offshore, so storm surge is not a threat as of right now in Fort Myers, but it is definitely a threat for Fort Myers once we get past lunchtime. So I can't say this enough. If you did not heed the warnings and you did not leave, it is too late to do so. We have bridges that are closing, the weather conditions are going downhill, and we are continuing to see the weather set in earnest. You can see these rain bands moving up Interstate 75, and look at Sarasota, a wind gust of 61 miles per hour. That is why we're seeing the power outages really stack up, and in fact, we're seeing these stronger winds even in inland locations. In Bartow, we've had a wind gust of 30 miles per hour. Jason, with a tropical system, comes hand in hand with the tornado threat, and you've been tracking a couple tornado warnings this morning.
Yeah, the good news right now is that there are no tornado warnings. Live look over in Orlando, and you just saw that flash there. That looks like that is some thunderstorms that are out there. We're also seeing the rain pick up all over in Florida there. So let's take a look right now at the radar. And as Britta was mentioning there, you see that eye here of Ian. It is still southwest of Port Charlotte, but we are really concerned about some of these outer rain bands because all morning long, that is when we have been seeing some of these tornado warnings that have been popping up here. So Melbourne, Fort Pierce right now, you're just seeing some light rain showers, no tornado threat as of right now. But anytime you have a tornado that's about to make landfall, what ends up happening is you have a huge amount of wind shear because it's interacting with what's happening at the ground. Wind shear, by the way, that is a change of wind speed and wind direction with height there. And so because of all that wind that ends up blowing across there, that's why you could end up getting just a real quick spin up here. But the good news here is, as of right now, no tornado warnings to tell you about. But we do have tornado watches that are in effect pretty much from Central Florida all the way down to South Florida. So you do need to make sure that you download the Fox Weather app, and you need to turn on those severe weather alerts. Now, the greatest chance at seeing a tornado today is going to be on that northeast side of Hurricane Ian. So that is going to be for places like Fort Myers as well as Naples and even in Sarasota. That's going to happen likely later on this afternoon and into this evening right before it makes landfall. But we do have a chance at seeing a quick spin up for places like Orlando, Daytona Beach, as well as over in the Melbourne area. And then for tomorrow, that tornado threat is going to continue. Now, so far, we've seen that tornado watch. It is up until 5 o'clock today, but I do anticipate that tornado watch is going to be extended into tomorrow here. So please make sure that once that tornado tornado watch has been issued for your area, that you consider what's going to be happening and make sure to review your tornado safety plan. You always want to make sure to get inside of a room that doesn't have any windows. Don't forget about that helmet. Figure out a way to protect your head, because Britta, you and I know that even with an EF0 tornado, you could still have a whole lot of damage.
Yes, you can. And one concern is going to be, holes being put in the top of your house, because then we have a tremendous amount of rain on the way. So if you're not able to cover up that leak, we're going to have some issues. There's a live look at Marco Island. You can tell the water is rocking and rolling. We are starting to see the surge numbers start to tick up. Right now in Naples, we have a storm surge of 1 foot. That's 12 inches of water. So that hits you around the shin. But we are going to see that number dramatically increase in this stretch between Fort Myers and Naples. That is a high concern. In fact, the National Weather Service has actually been increasing their forecast for storm surge. National Hurricane Center saying that we could see up to 18 feet of water above normally dry ground through the duration of this peak storm surge. So it is utmost concern and definitely a high ticket item. Right now we have wind gusts around 47 miles per hour in Punta Gorda. Notice that those winds are still offshore. So that's what we're going to be noticing over the next 6 hours. The winds are going to turn onshore. We've already seen that happen in Naples. And as this very crucial stretch of land, that southwest facing shore of Florida, starts to feel that onshore push, we're going to have that surge start to tick up. And it's only going to get worse as we go into the afternoon. Moving a little bit farther up to the north, Sarasota, Clearwater, this is going to be an interesting area. Right now, by the way, our winds are offshore, but look at the speeds here. Sarasota gusting up to 61 miles per hour. Depending on where the landfall is, that is going to dictate how much storm surge that we see. The strongest and highest storm surge is going to be just south of that landfalling site. So right now it looks like the critical spot is going to be from Fort Myers all the way down to Naples. But again, there's going to be a little bit of wiggle. That always happens with these landfalling systems. So we really need to watch.
All right, the time is now 9:31, guys. We are continuing to monitor all conditions as Hurricane Ian barrels towards the western coastline of Florida. We are witnessing both mandatory and voluntary evacuations orders. The entire state of Florida under a state of emergency. And it looks like we are getting a live now update from emergency management officials in Lake County, Florida. Let's listen in live, Ron Unfiltered.
As well, with dangerous gusts. Widespread flooding from the rain. This is one issue that we're particularly concerned about. Tornadoes, as always, associated with any hurricane, especially in the rain bands as they start coming in later today. We are now transitioning into the impact phase of the event here literally within the next few hours. The winds are forecasted to arrive in Lake County between 2 and 4 p.m. today. The Emergency Operations Center is at level 1. Full activation is full activation, and we are conducting 24-hour operations. Sandbag operations, because of that flooding issue, have been ongoing and will continue at all 6 locations throughout the county until noon today. As of today, 15 shelter locations are open throughout Lake County. The latest Hurricane Ian updates, including shelter and sandbag locations, that is available on Lake County, the Lake County website at www.lakecountyfl.gov. Storm. Additionally, the Citizens Information Line, the CIL, will be open for calls and residents during the day and overnight at 352-343-9999. That's 352-343-9999. As of this morning, we have accepted over 300 people into the Lake County shelters and distributed over 35,000 sandbags. As we are entering the impact phase of our response, residents should be finalizing their plans for the storm. You still have a little bit of time to do that. The greatest areas of concern for Hurricane Ian, again, are going to be flooding in Lake County particularly. You'll hear about this later on in a few minutes here, particularly the north part of the county with Astor. Our flooding and, of course, the wind, because this is a prolonged event, the wind damage as well. So we're asking residents to review their plans accordingly. We know that hurricanes can be stressful for the community, as I've mentioned before. Just stay tuned, follow us. We'll be able to provide you with as much information as possible. And of course, my encouraging word is that we know there's going to be a lot of damage potentially from this hurricane. Again, we know how people's lives will be impacted, but we've got the greatest team here, I believe, in the state of Florida, well trained, well prepared. We're ready for this as we could ever be, and we have a lot of people that are very passionate about serving people, that are very passionate about helping people. So we know the damage is going to come, and it could be varied from the north to the south part of the county, but one thing we do know is it will not change the heart and spirit of Lake County, and we'll pull together through this. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our Emergency Operations Director, Megan Milanese. Megan? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Megan Milanese. I am the Emergency Management Director for Lake County. Right now we are preparing for the risks that we are going to see from Hurricane Ian, and those risks are going to include strong tropical storm force to hurricane force winds and some severe flooding that we may see from the rain bands that are going to come through from the storm. So we are also under a slight tornado risk, but we are mostly concerned about the strong winds and the flooding that we're going to see from the rain. Our timeline right now, we are asking everyone to finalize plans and make sure that you're going to be where you're going to be to safely weather the storm by 2 p.m. today. That's going to be our timeline. You want to make sure that you're where you're going to be by 2 p.m. today. Please make sure that you're personalizing your plan. Make sure that you are getting everything that you will need to weather this storm together, whether that's something specific to you or your family. Just make sure that you are putting those plans together, finalizing that today. When it comes to sheltering in place, you're going to want to make sure that you're staying inside and away from the storm conditions. So you want to make sure that you are staying away from windows, things like that, while the storm is going on. After the storm has departed, please make sure to stay out of floodwaters, whether that's on the road or outside of your home. There could be contamination in those waters. And also make sure that you're staying away from any downed power lines. Watch out for the debris that might be in place outside of your home. So that is my guidance as of right now. I'm going to now turn it over to Sheriff Grinnell.
Well, good morning. On behalf of the police chiefs, our message is simple. We are respectfully asking our citizens to help us help you. How can you do that? By heeding the directions from emergency management, making sure that you're not out on the roadways, especially post-storm, to go out and take a look around. It's going to be important for us to get these roadways open as quickly as possible. We will be augmenting public works with inmate work crews to get that accomplished, but we really want everybody to be safe through this storm. It's going to be long in duration. It's going to be a lot of pooling of water on the waterways. We have direct response teams that are strategically located throughout the county in the event that a citizen is in need of life-threatening services. We will be there to respond to them. But we are asking you, please, unless you absolutely have to be out on the roadways, do not. That will help us to help you. We want to make sure that you're safe, and we're there to get through this time together. And as the commissioner was saying, there's a great team in place. So just heed that warning, and we're going to look at the post-storm effects with flooding. We have a plan in place for that, especially up in the Astor area. We'll have a heavy presence up there, so I'll stick around for some questions afterwards, but thank you. And I believe we have Superintendent Diane Cornegay up next.
Thank you, Sheriff. Well, good morning. I think everyone knows by now that schools are closed for the remainder of the week. We have 15 schools that are open, welcoming guests today. And I want to just give a special thank you to the school district administrators and all of the staff that are manning these shelters now 24 hours for the duration of this event, especially our food service department that will be providing meals for all of the guests in our shelters. All after-school events are canceled as well for the remainder of the week, including the Friday night football games. Those will be rescheduled if possible. The Saturday SAT testing that was scheduled at Lake Mineola High School has been rescheduled for October the 15th, and the SAT testing scheduled at Eustis High School on Saturday has also been canceled and will be rescheduled at a date to be determined. Please continue to follow not only the county information pages, but the social media pages for Lake County School. We will keep you updated on all the information that's needed. Until then, stay safe, and as we say in Lake County Schools, we are Team Lake.
Hi, Aaron Kistler. I'm from the Florida Department of Health in Lake County, and first I want to thank the superintendent and the school district for our special needs shelters are in the schools, so really appreciate that space, and also working with them, the school nurses, and providing us some extra support for our special needs shelters. Just a reminder, if people are going out to the special needs shelter, make sure you bring your medicines, bring your blankets, anything that would make you feel comfortable. Great news is all of our special needs shelters in Lake County are pet friendly, so you can bring your pet as well. And so definitely make sure that you got everything you need when you come to the shelters. And also just to make sure that everybody's got things prepared for after the storm, making sure that you have water. And Chief Dickerson would be speaking next, but as you guys know, most of the injuries and deaths for a hurricane happen after the hurricane during cleanup and when people are trying to get things back to normal. So.
Good morning, Jim Dickerson, the fire chief. I'm going to go over some safety tips for the generators especially. Generators need to be at least 20 feet away from any structure. Keep the generators away from overhangs or enclosed areas, including garages and porches. Even screened-in porches can allow CO to come into the building. Only refuel the generator when it is in the off position. We have had some injuries from that as well. Instead of backfilling or supplying your entire house, try to use extension cords for those essential appliances for your refrigerators or freezers and things like that. And the reason why we ask that is because when we try to re-energize the power lines, if you are actually feeding your house, you are energizing the grid, and it could delay us to restoring energy in those locations. Any trees that are down, treat them as though there's live power lines entangled with them, even if you don't see any. Wait until daylight to get out there and do anything. We don't want you out there in the middle of the night, especially with chainsaws. Chainsaw safety is one of the top issues post-storm. Please make sure, if you're not familiar with the chainsaw, that you get somebody that is to operate it correctly. Especially in the Astor area, we're going to experience a lot of high water. With the high water, we get some amphibious creatures that come out of the swamps, so be aware of that. You might see snakes, alligators, or things like that in areas you normally wouldn't. And no candles. Please do not use candles. During Irma, we actually had a fire fatality because somebody used a candle, so use flashlights only. And the sheriff, I thought he was going to address it, but I'm going to address it because it's always a pet peeve of mine. But traffic lights, when traffic lights are out, treat them as a four-way stop. Whenever you don't see any traffic lights working, slow down before the intersection and come to a complete stop. The first one there is the first one that goes through the intersection. And that's all I have. I'll turn it back over to the chairman.
All right, again, really appreciate you all coming out. You may not know this, but our county is now over 400,000 in population, so quite significant. We have a lot of new people that have moved to Lake County in the last few years in particular. So that's really important that we get the message out, and I want to thank you all for being here today. So we're available for questions, however you'd like to ask us.
I'm sorry, just one moment. Before we shift to questions, at one point during the press conference, a number was given 352-343 for the Citizens Information Line. The correct number is 352-253-9999. Again, 352-253-9999 for the Citizens Information Line.
We'll take my apologies for that. You mentioned that flooding is one of your biggest concerns, and you mentioned Astor. Are there any other areas that you're concerned about?
Yeah, obviously all the low-lying areas we are. We've seen historically in northeast Lake County to be affected the most by high water from the Lake Mac area right along the St. John's Basin. So we're cognizant of that and watching the modeling.
Sure. If I could just add one thing to that, sorry. but that's obviously a very hot area, but we want everybody to be cognizant of there's areas within roads that can flood, you know, a foot to 2 foot of water. We've done mapping, FEMA mapping throughout the county. We know where some of those areas could be, but they could be spread out throughout the entire county. So just exercise caution in that.
Well, this could be for you or the sheriff.
Sorry, Sheriff.
There's an area in the Claremont area, I think it is Emerald Lakes. It's a mobile home park. It's always flooded, right? Is that been evacuated?
Yes, sir. That area is. I don't know what the order is or what the. I don't think we've asked that they be evacuated. Maybe some voluntary evacuations have occurred, but we do know that is a very troublesome area. It can be when you get a lot of rain and the Claremont chain of lakes rises. So I know that it's being monitored, and I want to thank the city of Claremont who went out there and apparently have talked to all or nearly all of the residents over the last few days, making themselves available. I know our fire department as well has some coordination with the city on that. Okay. So we'll be monitoring that situation there.
Okay.
I know like Seminole, Flagler just talked about mandatory evacuations for certain areas. As you were just talking about this specific area, do you think that you're going to get to a point where we are about to issue a mandatory evacuation order?
So in most instances, we would just ask folks to assess that risk. We don't tend to put in place mandatory evacuations for areas in Lake County.
With the channel that you were monitoring, do you know where the water is and how close it is to potentially flooding, any particular ones that you're monitoring?
So we do have some forecast modeling for the Astor area that's currently available. Right now we're currently trying to work with our National Weather Service partners to make sure that we can get modeling for as many areas as possible prior to storm landfall. But we usually know that our Astor area is going to become an issue with the St. Johns River and flooding situation right there. So we currently have that, and we're working on some others.
Megan, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
During the storm, will you guys be putting out information like if there's a tornado, an actual tornado, or a fire, or something like that? Will you be putting that out?
So we do have alerts that would go out if there was a significant life safety issue to arise from a weather situation. We have alerts that would go to people's phones if there is a tornado warning in that area. It's happened for other events, and it would certainly happen for this one as well.
How do we get that?
So you can sign up for Alert Lake. That is our emergency alerting system. But in most instances, those tornado warnings are going to go through a weather alerting system. And I would also highly recommend that folks who want to get alerts get a NOAA weather radio and make sure that they have batteries for those weather radios as well, backup batteries, because those weather alert radios are going to receive those alerts if there is any kind of immediate life safety issue arising from a weather situation.
Commissioner, you mentioned that the population has recently, so you already went over a bunch of tips, but for newcomers, these hours leading up to 2 o'clock, which is when you said everybody should be in their spot, should people be going out and making any last minute preps, or should those be done right now?
Hopefully they're done by now. If you do have something, obviously we want everybody off the road really by noon, but 2 o'clock has been stated to wrap that up. We want you to do it in a very cautious way. We're starting to see kind of anecdotally an uptick in bad driving, people rushing around and stuff like that. So do it safely, but by noon really. I mean, you got the last couple hours here. And we understand you're new. If you're new to the area, new to Florida, many of our residents are new now. This might be their first hurricane. But this is a great community, and I'll say that over and over again, even next week as we get through this. This is a great community. There's a lot of great neighbors here. Get to know your neighbors, rely on them. It's a good time to get friendly. And again, we have a great, incredible staff here that will help. We'll be with you afterwards. The Citizens Information Line, I can't tout that enough. That's the way for anybody that's new. Rely on that Citizens Information Line, that number that LeVar just gave out. That would be the way to go to get questions answered, and we'll try to be with you as much as we can.
Sean, trash pickup and debris pickup? Are there special arrangements being made for that? Because everything's stopped.
We do. We have a contract that will enable us on the debris side to act quickly. Now, of course, the caveat to that is people's minds, the expectation of quickly. So to cover a county as large as Lake County is, it's going to take some time with the debris pickup. So we ask obviously for patience, but we do have a plan in place to pick up the debris. And as far as I know, I'm going to check and maybe just see if Jennifer's going to, I don't want to say something that's incorrect, but as far as regular trash pickup, that's going to resume as soon as possible, probably the early part of Monday. That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
When you talk about shelters, I know you said 300 people. It doesn't seem like we're at capacity at this point. But are you looking at, directing people to certain ones based on some of the numbers that you're seeing in? And then also, could you remind people what they can and cannot bring to the shelters?
Absolutely, and I'm going to let Megan, perhaps.
So we are closely monitoring our shelter capacities as of at this time. There have been no reported issues with capacity in any of our shelters. In terms of what to bring to a shelter, you're going to want to bring comfort items, any special dietary foods that you're going to need, any kind of things to entertain you while the power's out, pillow, blanket, medications, things like that. All things that should probably already be in your Go Kit if you have one. And I believe that we have also posted lists on our social media pages if you need any assistance with developing what that plan should look like. In terms of what not to bring, just make sure that you understand that it is limited spacing in the shelters. So most of our folks get 20 square feet within the shelter. So anything that can fit within that space range.
Do you have any other questions? As long as you guys are good to go, we'll go ahead and set up the B-roll segment over here. If you guys want to go ahead and stay put where you are, if you're going to go with me. Otherwise, my PIO Liliana will help walk you guys back down to the lobby.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
All right, and that was the latest from emergency management officials in Lake County, Florida. Again, preparing residents who are staying in place or sheltering at nearby makeshift emergency shelters, explaining exactly what to bring to these shelters. Make sure that you bring your personal items, a blanket if need be, batteries, bring your emergency kit, basically. We are, again, taking a live now look from XRAD weather radar, that storm continuing to barrel towards the western portion of the state of Florida. We are also taking a live now look from the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. We're learning more about the emergency response and preparations that authorities have in place following this storm, because according to the National Hurricane Center, we just received this update about an hour or so ago. The forecast is calling for 12 to 16 feet of Gulf Coast water from the normal high tide level. Now, this will push water over the islands and the coastline, into harbors, and up the rivers and over the banks at deadly heights. The surge can go up to 10 miles inland, depending on the river. So for a large part of Cape Canaveral and Fort Myers, they're likely to have areas in their communities underwater. High tide comes in this afternoon about the time that the surge will peak for some areas in the greater Fort Myers area, and this will add a couple of feet to the surge. So the tide is already extra high because we are in what's called king tide season, and again, we are expected to see an additional several feet of rain in addition to the storm surge that we're already tracking. So the Naples area, for example, we'll see slightly less, 7 to 11 feet of water will rise near the forecast in the coast later on this afternoon. Let's go ahead and make sure that we take our live XRAD radar full for you all as this storm is continuing to move a little bit closer. And again, another main concern is the destructive winds that we will potentially see. Winds that will rip through the southwest of Florida today. On the north side of the storm, the winds will come in bands with territorial rain. And because the storm is interacting with a front across the northern part of Florida, we could also see an intense corridor of rain develop across the entire peninsula from the Tampa Bay to central Florida. Again, damaging winds of hurricane strength will occur in that intense band, although the gusts won't be as destructive as the winds on the south side of the circulation. Over 2 feet of rain will likely fall in parts of central and north Florida over the next few days as Ian slowly makes his way north, moving at 10 miles per hour with speeds of 155 miles per hour. It is nearly a Category 5 hurricane. Now, just to put things into perspective, Hurricane Katrina reached Cat 5 strength over the Gulf of Mexico and then weakened to a Category 3 just before it made landfall in New Orleans and along the Mississippi coast. And that was one of the most destructive hurricanes in our nation's history. So a Category 5 hurricane means winds of up to 157 miles per hour or higher, and that means that catastrophic damage will occur. A high percentage of framed homes could be destroyed with a total roof failure, wall collapses, falling trees, power poles. It could potentially be a devastating situation, and that is why we are seeing responses from emergency management officials, state officials like the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and happening right now, we are getting a live update from FEMA. We know that they have activated and dispatched personnel across the state of Florida. So let's check in for this live update.
Are not going to be available today, unfortunately, but feel free to reach out to the news desk for any opportunities in the near future, and we can work to help you out with that. All right, so we'll get started here momentarily, and thanks for your patience and your time again this morning.
All right, guys, we are listening in live, raw, and unfiltered to this update from FEMA. We know that they have personnel across the state of Florida, but let's interrupt this live update because we have the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, briefing the media.
Many parts of the state. We have bearing down on the southwest coast of Florida a really monster hurricane. This is a hurricane that is strengthened. It is Category 4 plus. It may be a Category 5 by the time it hits the Florida coast. We've been in contact all morning with a lot of the local officials in places like Charlotte and Lee County, and they understand that this is going to be a major impact. We're asked about some of the evacuations, and basically what they report to me is that we were talking to the folks in Charlotte. Most of the people in those vulnerable areas did leave. Not everybody did, and that was provided, the mandatory. Some just did not do that. So they're keeping tabs on kind of where you still have people in very vulnerable locations. But you have a Category 5 storm hit, that's going to produce an enormous amount of storm surge. It's obviously going to have very ferocious winds, and it's going to be life-threatening. And so people are taking a risk with their health, their safety, and their lives by being in the eye of that storm. Nevertheless, you do have search and rescue that are going to be poised to go to respond to people that are in difficult circumstances once the storm breaks through. Of course, safety is what we've been stressing in the preparations over these many days leading up to this storm. And you've had millions and millions of Floridians who have made preparations. Many have evacuated to higher ground and safer surroundings. And of course, you have local level officials, state as well as federal marshaling. This is an unprecedented amount of resources that have been marshaled to respond to Hurricane Ian. We did this in the run-up to Hurricane Dorian, which was expected to hit Florida as a Cat 5. Fortunately, it turned north and rode the east coast of Florida without having a direct impact. But that was a massive mobilization. This is more than that. and we understand how significant this storm is. And even when it was kind of a disorganized system far away, we saw the potential for what this could do. The power restoration and the resumption of services is something that's very, very important. You look at the number of people that are on the southwest coast of Florida, for example. Fortunately, most of them are not going to have their homes destroyed, but almost all of them are going to lose power, and you're going to have services that are going to be interrupted. So resuming services is a top priority. That's going to require to make sure that the bridges are safe. It's going to make sure that the roadways are clear of any debris so these guys can get in and do their work. It's also something that, given the severity of this storm, there's a difference between simply having a down power line and repairing that, which you would do on normal types of storms, and then having major structural damage to the underlying electrical infrastructure. And when you have a Category 5 storm hitting, potentially, when you have massive storm surge, that is going to interrupt, most likely, a lot of the underlying infrastructure. And so when FPL and other companies are going in, some of those tasks are going to be, you're going to have to rebuild some of this stuff. And so the folks in those affected areas should just understand that if it's as simple as simply just hooking up a few more power lines, then that's what they'll do. But in those areas that are going to have the most severe impact, it's likely going to require to have some re-engineering, to have some structural fixes, and that's going to require manpower, but it's just going to take a little bit more time. So people understand. I was able to speak to the president of FPL. They understand how significant this is. They understand how important it is to get the services back up and running, but we also understand the severity of this storm and the really, really catastrophic damage that it can inflict on the coast, on the southwest coast of Florida. You are starting to see power outages across the state, but you're going to see way, way more over the next 48 hours. I mean, you're going to have millions of people without power in this state within the next 48 hours, no question. This morning, Kevin Guthrie, our director of the Florida Department of Emergency Management, has asked for additional airlift, hoist, and high water vehicles from the Department of Defense in coordination of FEMA. The SecDef has approved Florida's request for dual status of our National Guard forces under Title 10 to provide additional resources and additional forces, and we're really thankful for the fulfillment of that request. We've got about 1,200 personnel for our Florida Department of Transportation that are on standby to perform cut and toss operations. These guys can't work if they can't get to where they're going, and so that's the top priority for the Florida Department of Transportation as well as Florida Highway Patrol to clear these roads, to make sure that the bridges are safe, and to really green light these operations to get back into these communities. In Southwest Florida, this is a lesson from Irma. They have people that they're calling leave behind teams, so that when the storm passes, their job is to clear the runways and make sure that we can resume air operations as quickly as possible. There's going to be a need to bring in things like food and water via fixed-wing aircraft, and so you want to have those runways up and running as soon as possible. Obviously, some of them could be underwater. I mean, there's going to be things that go into that, but having those folks on the ground there to do it I think is going to make a big, big difference. We have 5,000 guardsmen. We have 2,000 from other states. We've got 9 Chinooks rotary wing aircraft that are ready to respond. Of course, Jimmy Petronas has been talking about our urban search and rescue teams. There are 5 of them are ready to go, and they will be in that to commence rescue operations as soon as it's safe to do so. Our Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has placed their Special Operations Group in Broward County. That's high water vehicles, shallow draft boats, and helicopters that are ready for immediate deployment once it is safe to do so. I want to thank, we now have total throughout the state, we've got over 40,000 personnel, linemen, and associated personnel that are involved with restoration of electrical services and power services that are stationed in the state of Florida. And these are folks that are staged across the state of Florida. If you look in Southwest Florida, you're going to have movement, less likely from southeast for additional surge of resources. Of course, this staging area is going to send people all across the state. I know FPL is mindful of, yes, we're going to have a catastrophic impact in Southwest Florida, but this thing is going to, really barrel across the state. It's going to be a strong storm. I mean, it's going to weaken once it gets on shore, but you're going to end up, you could end up in Central Florida to have winds, certainly gusts that would be hurricane force. It's going to at least be a tropical storm as it barrels across. That's going to cause problems with the vegetation. It's going to cause problems with trees. The ground's already wet based on the amount of precipitation we have. That's ripe conditions for trees to fall over. That means more power lines are down. So that's going to have a cascading effect. So the most significant impacts will obviously be the landfall, but you're going to have other impacts. And so that's why you have these folks stage. That's why you have so many people, because there's going to be a lot of different places around the state of Florida where they're going to have to respond to. We now have 26 states that have sent us support right now, including Tennessee, Virginia, Montana, Louisiana, New York, Colorado, Indiana, New Jersey, and Georgia. I want to thank them for their support. It's much appreciated. I've been in contact personally, but then also the Florida Department of Emergency Management. We're in contact with the local folks, particularly in Southwest Florida, about needs, and their needs have been met. Obviously, once the storm hits, there's going to be additional needs, and we stand by ready to offer the support in that regard. It's very, very important. We are going to have significant rescue operations that are going to have to be done, because you have some people, not most, but you do have some people who've chosen to hunker down in some very vulnerable areas. And so that is going to be something that I know that they're keeping a very close eye on. They're going to monitor the impacts of the storm and then monitor how those folks have been able to weather it. But we anticipate, whether it's ground, water, air, all different types of ways to go in and help people. That's going to commence immediately upon this storm hitting. Pray for people. This is a major, major storm. You never want to see any storms hit, because it creates a lot of problems. But I'll tell you, the state has done a lot of storms over the past. There's some you deal with. It's never fun. It's never fun to have damage. It's never fun to see flooding. It's never fun to see power interrupted. But you kind of deal with it, and then you move forward. There's some storms that really leave an indelible impact, and we've been working with the folks up in Northwest Florida on Hurricane Michael. That was a major storm. There are obviously people that were directly impacted. We had fatalities as a result of that storm, but then you had so many other things that have happened all the way to this day that recovery goes on. This is going to be one of those historic storms, and it's going to really shape the communities in Southwest Florida and have a profound impact on our state. So we just ask people for their thoughts and their prayers. We know there's a lot of people that want to be helpful in a variety of ways. As this goes, we'll be calling on more and more people to pitch in a variety of different capacities. Not everyone is a skilled lineman who can go in and do that. Not everyone can operate special operations to go and rescue people, but some people can volunteer. Some people can help with folks who've been displaced, and there's going to be a need for all of that as this storm goes through and as we assess the damage that has been done. I'm thankful for what they're doing here with Florida Power and Light. This is something that when you're a major Florida-based company, this is just part of what you do with your business. And I'm happy that they've really leaned in on this and really marshaled a tremendous amount of resources to be able to offer the quickest and most effective response possible that they can do as a company. And I know there's going to be a lot of Floridians that are going to be really happy about that. This is not an easy thing. These power problems are not going to be easy, but I think they're committed to putting the manpower in place, spending the resources necessary to have as most successful conclusion as we can. So we're going to hear from some folks from FPL. We're also going to hear from Dane Eagle and Jimmy Petronas. So Jim Bush, Senior Director for External Affairs FPL, you want to say a few things?
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. My name is Jim Bush. I'm a Director of External Affairs for Florida Power and Light. On behalf of the FPL, we want to thank Governor DeSantis for coming out to greet the men and women who have come to respond to Hurricane Ian. We have assembled a restoration workforce of more than 19,000. That includes FPL employees, contractors, and men and women from partner utilities from around the country. There are more than 30 states represented here today. We have line workers who traveled in at this site from as far as Texas and Oklahoma, Minnesota, and North Dakota, all to help Florida respond to this challenge. There have been many times that FPL employees have traveled to other states to help them when they were in need, and now they're here to return the favor, and we're very grateful for them for that. Here at the Lake City processing site, these men and women will be briefed on the restoration challenges ahead. We will share our work and processes for storm procedures so that everybody is onboarded and ready to go. They will then fan out across the state and be positioned at 37 work bases that are currently close to the areas that will be most highly impacted. And they will work around the clock until power is restored for everybody as quickly and as safely as possible. It won't be easy. We anticipate that there'll be many downed trees and debris, perhaps tornado damage, and in many areas flooded conditions throughout our service territory. But these men and women will work extended hours, 16-hour days in some pretty difficult conditions, and as I mentioned, they'll work around the clock until power is restored.